This podcast is a member of WildGamesProductions.com and D20Radio.com.
I'm Chuck Norris, and I approve this game.
Between the time when gamers played with miniatures and chainmail and the rise of the Wizards of the Coast, there was an age of advanced role-playing undreamed of. And onto the Skygax, destined to bear the jeweled crown of TSR upon a troubled brow, it was given to teach us all how to roll for initiative.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready to rumble!
This is the Roll for Initiative podcast. I am DM Vince, sitting alongside DM Nick.
Hello, everyone.
DM Matt.
Hello, everyone.
DM Chad.
Yo.
And this is volume number 3, issue 131, where we're going to laugh and laugh some more. Yes, we're back, and we're going to be doing a second part of the Oriental Adventures this week, following up on the first podcast we have, issue 130, which everyone seemed to really enjoy. The in-depth look that we had back at the martial arts, and thanks to Chad, we were able to sit back
You
and
can call me Jay.
Yeah, we'll share that little joke with everybody. What was that that quote from the forums, Chad? It's like having Jason back with a different name.
Well, maybe that's what you have. I just went by a different name. No.
That's right. So now that we have Chad sitting in with us, we're going to talk a little bit more about the box set for Oriental Adventures. But first, before that, we're going to go into some sage advice.
Sage advice.
So in Sage Advice this week, we do have a voicemail, and if you want to leave a voicemail, that is 570-865-4210, the hotline.
Hotline. Ninjas are standing by.
Whoa, ninjas.
Yeah.
Ninjas do not exist.
Or do they?
All right, here's his first voicemail.
Hey guys, this is DM Kojo. Just got done listening to issue 130. Really enjoyed it, as usual. Early on, you had a discussion about magic users. I wanted to give some thoughts on that. It's been 20 years since I played a magic user. But when I played, and this granted was in classic D&D, basic D&D, if I had a magic user ran out of spells, I did quite a bit of other stuff. You know, I would use the sling to make called shots on enemies who were engaged against my comrades in melee. Granted, it was hard to hit with a called shot. I figured, that was one way I could do my best to try to hit somebody in the head. That way, the warrior can then take them out. I also used caltrops. I figured they weren't just for thieves, but I'd have them try to throw caltrops like behind the feet of people who were in melee. And I also would use flasks of oil like Molotov cocktails and lob them in over the party to try to get back rank of any monsters that were attacking. So there's lots of things you can do there. I also use the intelligence bonus like the cleric's wisdom, just like Nick and Chad described it. It gives them 1 or 2 at most, usually extra first level spells based on higher intelligence. Makes them a little bit more survivable. Then they have 2 or 3 spells at first level instead of just the 1. But this also got me thinking about how people handle spell books for magic users, especially initially when you create the character. Intelligence bonus aside, if you don't use that or if their intelligence is too low, and they only have 1 first-level spell they can memorize per day, but they've got a spell book that presumably contains more spells than just the 1 that they can memorize every time. Because when you're learning from your master, I assume you're learning a lot of different spells that you can use along the way. The way that I've handled this is I always give my first level magic users read magic and detect magic, because I think those are essential to performing some of their spellcraft type duties and learning. Then I roll 2d6, or I have the players roll 2d6, and that's how many first level spells they have in the spell book. But they don't get to just pick them. I have a list. I always create an NPC magic user who is their master. I create that ahead of time. I have several ready to go that I've created, in the past. This ready to pull out at a moment's notice if somebody wants to make magic user. I say, okay, this guy's your master, and here is his spell book, and here's what you can learn from him from your first level spell. And I have them pick half of their 2d6 roll of spells from the master spell book, which I've already hand selected or sometimes randomly determined. The other thing is I've then compiled a list of first level spells that come from different sources, Player's Handbook, Unearthed Arcana, Oriental Adventures, Dragon Magazine, that I have put into one complete table with numbers so you can roll a die against it. And then I have them randomly roll the other half of their 2d6 worth of spells to determine spells they learned along the way in their apprenticeship. Maybe they found a scroll here or there. Maybe they got it from a library research, whatever. So not limited to just the spells that are in their master spell book that I set up in advance. So that way they get to pick some from a list, and they also get some at random, which sometimes gives them spells that they might not want, but end up benefiting them down the road. Things like comprehend languages and some of these spells that people don't want to take because they're not as offensive or defensive minded. They're more utilitarian. People don't want them, but sometimes you got to have them. So I find that it works better if you basically have them roll randomly. So just my thoughts on magic users and spell books. Love to hear how you guys deal with spell books. So thanks for free work. Bye.
Oh, thank you, DM Kojo. One flaw on that thing is unless you have a slings as your proficiency weapon for a magic user, you're at -8 for that call headshot, I think.
Yeah, something like that.
I don't think you want to. You're having a tough time hitting somebody as it is as a magic user.
And hitting, using a missile weapon while everybody else is in melee, not a good idea.
Oh, that's right. That's another negative too, because people are in melee. You might hit them. So,
although
he does it. Fuck. Oh, sorry about that, Bill. Ooh.
Wait, Chad, you had something interesting to interject?
Well, I was gonna say, one thing he could, as a magic user at first level, that you could really be effective with a sling doing is taking out other spellcasters as they are trying to cast. A magic user would be the one who could quickly identify another, an enemy spellcaster, and they don't have to even make a called shot. They don't even have to do that much. 1 point of damage is fine. They just have to effectively hit the caster, break his concentration.
And also those cocktails, that's got to be kind of dangerous, especially with people in melee. What if you kind of slip and you hit the wrong, it lands the wrong way, you might hit your comrades.
Right, and that's the good thing about taking out the other spellcaster too, is that more than likely the other spellcaster is not going to be in melee.
Yeah. Well,
or with those cocktails, what if you slip?
True.
And they break?
You roll 1, yeah.
Yeah. Then next thing you know, you need to stop, drop, and roll.
Yeah, or an evil DM like me might say, "Oh, you threw it, but it only went like half a foot and it exploded in front of you and your comrades."
Right.
I liked his idea for when you're beginning spellcaster, what spells you have and randomly roll. They had something like that in Hackmaster 4th edition. You rolled for an offensive spell, a defensive spell, and some like miscellaneous spell. So that's a pretty cool idea. I like that. It
does help keep alive the spells that nobody really wants to take.
Right? Yeah, that's true.
Because how do those spells, if everyone's going to take magic missile, whatever, this, that, fireball, this, that, what about those other spells that nobody cares about? How do they survive on throughout time?
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Down, how are they going to survive? There you go. There's your reason if you wanted a reason.
I'm always surprised too by people, I guess I play Magic Heroes quite a bit when I do play anymore. And I found the value of the less popular spells because let's face it, when you come to a giant cliff face or a fireball isn't going to help you that much.
Nope.
But a featherfall will.
Rope trick.
Yeah.
Rope trick is
Rope trick's such a great spell.
Yeah.
That is an awesome spell. Rope trip that'll eliminate your whole need to have parties staying up during the night on watch practically.
Yeah. I mean, that's the spell that is
let's
really
cut it
tailored. Yeah, it's tailored for any spellcaster, either cleric or magic user, if you're too deep into the dungeon and you can't get to town soon enough, use Rope Trick. That's the place.
Yeah,
you go in that extra dimensional space. You're there for a few hours. You rest up. You get a few spells back. Bada boom, bada bing. You're good to go.
How about this? Why don't we just cut the magic user talk now, and we'll do follow up next week on magic users.
Okay.
Yeah. Sounds good to me.
Sounds super.
But you know what? Let me throw one thing in here.
No.
I would say this.
No, sorry.
Give one third one, because he said he gave them read magic, detect magic, and write. Because if you have write, here's the thing a lot of people forget. If you make copies of your spells, you can now have a magic user at first level who can do a lot more than throw one spell per day, because he can start reading off his book.
True.
Well, if you read it off your book, it disappears.
Yes, that's why you need write, and you need to make copies.
Until what, 8th level?
Well, I mean, here's the thing. At first level, it's a write as a first level spell. You can write a first level spell and make copies of it. And if you do that,
I don't know. It's kind of
scrolls around.
It's kind of a debate. We'll save it for the Magic User Show.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
The Magic User Show. That sounds great.
The Magic User Show. I think
expect some guy come out with a top hat with a pack of cards and everything.
It's going to be a Magic User Throwdown.
It'll be Nick.
Hey.
Now, actually, we did discuss that at one point. We debate. Everyone kind of debated the fact if we can do that with a first level spell or not. But we'll talk about that more in depth.
Yeah, it sounds like that'd make a really good show. We'll revisit magic users again. Absolutely.
Yes. I believe it was back when Will was with us, and he had a big problem with the people using that right spell and first level spells. But really? I have to go listen now to see what he said.
Actually, let's see. Magic User we talked about back in issue 33, so that's way back.
We talked about it with Will, though. I remember him being adamant about that spell.
Well, that's when we did our full Magic User show. It might have been either in the Sage Advice or...
I mean, that's the whole purpose, practically, of that spell, is so that they can learn spells from their master and write it into their own spell book.
Mm-hmm.
Master. Oh, not that.
Anyway, though.
All right, so we do have some emails here. We have 2 of them. If you want to write us, you can do rfistaff@gmail.com. And the first one comes from JP, Reese, and Michaela. Hi, guys. I would like to thank you for your great work on your podcast. I was a huge AD&D player back in high school, and I've recently rediscovered it by playing it with my children. I have twins that are now 10 years old, and they love the game. I started listening to your podcast in the car, and they really love it, too. They've gotten lots of gameplay and character tips from your podcast and always request to listen to you and you guys whenever we're in the car. Oh, that's cute.
That's cool.
Yeah. Maybe they like us a lot. We play a homebrew game of my making. We use a mix of first edition and there's some other edition that shall not be named. Laugh out. Second edition, he calls that the next edition that shall not be named. That's cute. Rules leaning towards more 1E. The kids wanted me to email you about a topic of playing humanoid races. It'd be great to hear your opinions on it, maybe even a topic of the week.
We've done a show on that.
Have we?
Yes, we did a show on humanoids, I believe. I
know
we did not too long ago.
Yeah, we did a show on playing monsters as your class.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you need to look no further than the Creature Crucibles.
Yeah, and that would be back in issue 44. I'm a monster, rawr.
Yeah, but I thought we also did another one similar to that not too long ago. I thought it wasn't that far back. Because I remember we talked about...
yeah, and we did issue 114 as well.
Yeah, I think that's where it was, because I brought up...
Because we were talking Monsters Quest, and then we went into allowing the monsters as a class.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he could, have a listen to that one, issue 114 and 44. And I think I also mentioned, I think still a great resource, even it's from second edition. Get the complete book of humanoids. Mm-hmm. It's easily ported in the first edition, and you got someone who's interested in playing a hobgoblin, go for it.
Or you can go to just basic Dungeons and Dragons and get. They came out with several Creature Crucibles, which I'm looking at one on Amazon right now. Yeah, we played one time using it. I played a leprechaun. which was actually fun.
Were these always after your Lucky Charms? No,
they were always after me Lucky Charms. But, I've seen it here on Amazon, and it says right out here, you will learn to play gnomes, gremlins, pegatars, nagpas, and other fantastic creatures as player characters.
What's the price?
Yeah, pretty cool stuff.
And how much?
How much?
Oh, I'm sorry. 21 used and new, looking from $12.50. So you could get it for just over $12.
That's not too bad.
Yeah, it's not too bad.
All the way up to $80.
That's a little bad.
Yeah, the Creature Crucibles were very good. I mean, they were very well written, and they're kind of a rare book. There were several editions of it. One was about forestland creatures, which is where, like, I believe it had the leprechaun and it had the Nixie, not the Nixie,
dryads,
dryads, leprechauns, brownies, that sort of thing. And then there was this one, which has like goblins, hobgoblins, that sort of thing. But you have to remember now, you'll have to alter it if you're going to use it with First Edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, because this is for basic D&D.
Right.
But it was very, very neat book.
Back to the email. We use rules from the Complete Book of Humanoids. Okay, so that's from 2nd edition, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, okay. They like a variety of uniqueness and the humanoid races and do quite a good job of role-playing them. Good. Our campaign setting presently is in an isolated island, so it works out well with as little civilization, though that is something we'll obviously deal with down the road. My son, in particular, loves playing his, I've never been able to pronounce this, Aarakocr.
Oh, the Arokra.
I've never been able, what was Arokra?
They were like a bird humanoid, I believe.
Yeah.
And wanted to know if you guys ever had one of those in your campaigns. I've never had it. No, I've never been able to pronounce it pretty much.
I know what it is. I've never had one.
I know what they are, but I never had one in the campaign, no.
Well, keep up the great work, and we'll keep on listening.
Cool.
All right, cool. So there's some feedback for that. And the last one comes from Brian from N Magazine, the editor-in-chief.
Hey!
I have a 40-minute commute twice a day, and I have a lot of time to fill listening to RFI. It has the advantage that nothing interrupts my listening time, but it has the disadvantage that taking notes is suicidal.
Yes, don't take notes and drive.
Yeah, just drive, man.
Yeah.
Since I place a premium on continued survival, I have to rely upon my faulty memory for notes.
Get yourself a digital recorder.
Yeah, we want you to survive, Brian.
Right.
After listening to issue 85 to present, I started over with issue 1. Oh, I'm sorry for you.
Wow.
I'm currently in the middle of 38. Sandbox Adventures, but got sidetracked listening to the Marvel Superheroes podcast. Yeah, we got sidetracked listening to that ourselves.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the playtest of the psionics in issue 31. It reminded me of why I dispensed with psionics after a brief playtest in issue.
Hey.
Like most people.
Yeah. Psionics does not... she puts, psionics does not fit into AD&D. It's a non-level based system, and generally only one PC in the party has psionics, and that PC is dead or worse after encountering the first tougher psionic monster. The entire system is poorly thought out. Duh. And in issue 35, someone commented that someday y'all would be doing issue 135. That couldn't be any of us. We would never say y'all. So now that you've come up on that magic number, we're not at 135 yet, Brian. No, I'm kidding. How does it feel? Well, yeah, I'd like to talk to... What do you think? Nick, 135 coming up real soon.
135, huh?
Yeah.
How do I feel about it? I'm still here. I don't know. I'll be on as long as Vince wants me to be. That's all I got to
stop it. We extended Nick's contract. Don't worry.
Yes. We were in negotiations, but...
We gave him copper.
Yeah.
I really love doing the show. What can I say?
Yeah. That's one of the random jokes on the website is when people were asking questions, what happened to this person? I'm like, oh, their contract ran out, so they didn't resign.
Right. We
offered him a 1-year, $10 million deal he didn't take.
Yeah.
He put in a multi-year contract.
What happened to Jason? Oh, his contract expires and his options was to leave.
Right.
I treated it as a wrestling thing. That's,
Right.
you know.
We wish them well in their future endeavors. We've optioned them down to our AAA farm team down in Butte, Montana.
Yes, we've optioned Matt for lifetime, so he's never anywhere.
Yeah. Yes, I got the lifetime no-cut contract, which in wrestling terms means I'll probably be cut next week.
That's correct. After you get a bad reaction from the crowd.
Yes.
But maybe you'll be back in 2 weeks as part of a new angle.
Yes, or I'll come back under a mask.
Oh, God. Are we going this whole wrestling angle again? Oh, dear God.
Oh, that's right. Nobody likes wrestling angles, so we can't talk about that.
Yeah.
I just haven't followed it since, like, early 90s. I'm sorry.
Well,
okay.
Yeah.
We feel great for 135 coming up real soon.
Yeah.
It's an accomplishment going almost 5 years for this show.
Has it?
Yeah, almost. When people were saying, they won't last more than 50 issues.
Considering it was like December 2009.
Yeah.
Was the first show.
And I remember people saying we wouldn't last more than 50 issues.
Yeah.
I did. I remember a lot of people, and especially on Dragon's Foot, were like, "Oh, they won't last more than 50 shows. I guarantee you. Watch around Serial."
No one's that big of a masochist.
Yeah.
Wow, and there's a lot of material. I mean, even after this many shows, there's still so much to talk about too.
There it is.
I remember back in issue 26 when Chad was on the show for the first time.
Yeah.
Actually, you know what? I don't think I was. Oh, yeah, that was the interview with Frank Mincer, wasn't
That's
it?
right.
Yes, that was a
I
Frank
was
Mincer.
on that one. Yeah.
You got roped into that one.
I was right after. Yeah, I had just finished running a game of Top Secret that Jason was in, and that's how we met, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Jason's like, "We're doing a podcast. You're coming with us," and you're like,
He said, "Hey, we're going to go talk to Frank Mincer. You want to come?" I was like, "Yeah."
and then we sweated.
Little did he realize.
I remember apologizing to you guys afterwards because I was like, "Man, I'm sorry I asked a question to Frank. I shouldn't have probably said anything during the recording." And you guys are like, "No, that was good."
Yeah, I still remember that interview. We were sweating like hell in that room.
Yeah, it was. And I remember there was a guy that was in there typing on the computer.
Yeah.
And
Yes,
he
I
could care
remember
less.
hearing it. I heard the clickety clackety on the
Because we were in the
recording.
media center of the hotel that Jason decided to pick, which had the anime con going on at the same time.
The anime con, was going on outside the door, and it was this little enclosed computer room. And this guy came in and started using the computer, and we kept looking over at him as Frank was talking, and you could tell he was like, "I don't care, I'm using the computer."
Yeah.
Gamers.
Anyway, so Brian's letter goes on to say, as you know, you have too many dice when you can't carry them all in one trip. A pull-along suitcase is a suitable method for getting around that problem. And that's how he did his email. Word.
You can never have too many dice.
No.
But tell us how you really feel about Psionics.
Well, it sucks. No.
I like it.
You know what?
I hate Psionics. Why don't you just play a Jedi, all right?
Yeah.
Force.
You know, I think it works on the. I think we talked about it before. It depends on what kind of flavor. If it's
it's how you translate it. If you call
you're
it
into the-
Psionics, it doesn't fit. But if you call it mysticism or what have you, it's rose is a rose, but it's all how something is seen.
Well,
Right.
Yeah, but
Play
the
Jedi,
thing
play
is,
Star Wars.
the system in itself that's why they stuck it in the back in the
You can
appendix
adjust the system,
with the
though.
bard.
You can play
The first
around with
bard.
this. I mean, heavens, wouldn't be the first rule.
Gary did apologize later on for the psionics section. Everybody,
Well, no apology required, sir.
well, yeah.
We never.
I'm of the opinion now, though, with psionics, and I said it before, if you're into a high fantasy setting, very Tolkien-esque, it doesn't fit. But if you're in to what's called low fantasy, more like Robert E. Howard type thing, yeah,
I would say we're more like Robert E. Howard.
Yeah.
It's how it's really
the system's still broken.
I would say just go play Star Wars, okay? That's all.
Catherine Kurtz, High Darini, read it, very good. Camber of Coldy, it's all psionics.
Yeah, but that's a novel. It works in a novel.
But they call it magic.
Great. It works in a novel, but it doesn't work in a game mechanics sense.
Like I said, you can tweak it. It wouldn't be the first rule that we've had to tweak in D&D, but you can tweak it a little bit, and I think it can work.
Tweak it a lot.
Tweak it.
I have 2 words for you: body weaponry. Most broken ability ever for psionics. Come on.
And if you're not down with that, anyway.
It's always like a Tower of Iron Will. I don't know. I mean, it just maybe part of the love for it, for me at least, is that I just remember reading that when I first picked up the game. It was one of those things, in the DMG or I'm sorry, the Player's Handbook as well, that I just always remember. It's like the DM screen. It always gives you that nice feel when you see the old classic DM screen. It's one of those things. I open up the DMG and I always think of the page with the big scimitar and everything. But I still really do believe that you can fix it if you want to fix it. If otherwise, it's probably too much. If it's not something you really care about to begin with, it's probably too much trouble to fix it. Yeah.
Yeah, so there.
And that's all I got to say on that.
That's the bottom line.
Maybe we'll look at psionics again. I don't know.
I think we did psionics. Come on. Didn't we do like 4 shows on psionics, Matt?
Oh, let's see.
I think it's more like 2.
I know
the other two I blotted out of my memory.
I know we did a creature feature one on it when Jason challenged you and I to do psionics, and he was the creature or something.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember that episode.
Yeah,
He gave us those sheets. I think I still have those on my computer.
Right, yeah, because I was at Jason's apartment in New York for that one, because I actually ran through the play test, me and friend of mine, prior to us recording that show. As for
play tested it.
Yeah.
When you need a whole separate paper to track all your psionic junk, that's not no.
Well, you need a whole separate sheet of paper to track all your magic spells at high level.
That's a different story.
That's different.
It's not the same, man.
Yeah.
You're just playing mind games with me now.
See, there you go with psionics again, mind games. Okay.
That's right.
And that's all the emails we have for this week. If you want to write in, that's rfistaff@gmail.com. If you want to send us a voicemail of under 5 minutes, 570-865-4210, the hotline. Let's head into Table Manners.
Typical. Of all the evil creatures in the world, I'd like to find one with table manners.
What are you kidding me? I spent years cultivating the worst table manners on the planet.
Table manners.
All right, this week in Table Manners, we're going to be talking a little bit about one of my favorite box sets that came out, Kara-Tur, The Eastern Realms. Now, this box set came out in 1988, December of 1988. Thanks, Matt. And I've always liked this box set because it was a way to actually use the Oriental Adventures book and have an established setting behind it that was actually pretty well written. It came out. If you open the box, you'd see 2 different books within it. Volume 1, I believe, was all about. I believe that one was all about the Chinese-based continent, which was Xiaolong. Mm-hmm. And it also had their Malaysianist-esque area called Malatra. It had Tulung, Tabat, which is obviously a lot like Tibet, the Plain of Horses. So you have your Mongolian area. And then in the second book, you had a more Japanese-centric area. You had the island nations of Kozakura and Wa. So again, this was a box set. Now you finally had a box set where you could set your Oriental Adventures, and you didn't actually have to homebrew your campaign. You
got 2 maps too, right?
Yeah, and it had some of the really great maps. Now, this was for Forgotten Realms. I always preferred to play Greyhawk, so I always just kind of shoved it into my Greyhawk world. But it was originally for the Forgotten Realms, and like a lot of those Forgotten Realm box sets that came out, it had some really nice maps. I think there was like 4 maps in that box set.
Yeah, they're huge, just like in the original Forgotten Realms box set.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I actually had the pleasure of talking to one of the people who was responsible for writing that, and that was Deborah Taramis Christian, who prefers to go by Taramis. And Taramis is a extremely nice lady. She was the one responsible for writing the Kozakura the Volume 2 book that detailed Kozakura and Wa. She also wrote up Malatra. So I had this opportunity to talk to her, and she was kind enough to sit back, and we did a bit of an interview, which I believe we have.
Yes, we do, and we can head right over to that now if you'd like.
Sure. Do you guys have any thoughts, though, before we do so on the Kiritur box set?
I didn't pick up the box set because I wasn't sure about it back then when we had it. I thought it was going to be something I wasn't really interested in, because at that time my love for OA was kind of fading. Being that the great Joe DM.
The great Joe DM?
Yes, the great Joe DM actually went back to great Joe DM land and disappeared at that point. And we hadn't heard from him in quite some time, so we stopped playing OA. And the rest of us really didn't. No one else really liked OA except for me, honestly, and Joe. So people stopped playing it. And even if I wanted to run it, no one wanted to play it. So we kind of just switched back to regular D&D. So we never picked up the box set.
Yeah.
I did pick it up later on in life, but I never used it. It just sits on my shelf. I'm looking at it.
Yeah.
Yay.
I never played in it either. For whatever reason, just running the Dungeons. If I think Dungeons and Dragons, I don't think of going to Eastern Asian culture. So it just kind of seemed like a bit of a disconnect at the time. So I've never got into it either, having like little experience with it. So that's why I'm really looking forward to the interview. I'm like, teach me, because it just from what I've scanned of the box set, it seems so detailed. And
it is incredibly detailed.
Yeah, and for those that hate real world like analogous comparisons to in their fantasy gaming, this isn't the set for you, because you can draw comparisons to a lot of real world cultures in this game.
Yeah, I think they actually tried to make this as much as possible. They kind of tried to root it in the real areas of the East, which I like. I think it gives it an added level of authenticity, I suppose you could say, meaning, it just makes it feel more real for me. But that said, these are not supposed to be, Malatra is not Malaysia any more than, Furiandi is France.
Right.
So you can really, you don't have to treat it as an analog, and they did do a lot of work on the books. I think it's really well done. But you're right. You know what? When I was younger, I didn't do a lot of use. I didn't get a lot of use out of it at the time, because we just, while we would use the character classes from the Oriental Adventures book, I mean, I don't know how many times we had a Kensai in our Western themed party, but we really never got around to just doing a strictly Oriental campaign, which is too bad, because I've been using this box set now as I've become an adult at conventions, and I'm having a blast with it. It's a lot of fun to do something simply in the Far East. But anyway, so have a listen to the interview and, see what you can get out of it.
When I was a teenager back in the 80s, I remember first reading Shogun by James Clavell, and that sparked for me a lifelong love affair with the Asian culture. And being a huge fan of Dungeons & Dragons, you can imagine my giddy feeling when in 1985, TSR put out the now classic Oriental Adventures book for first edition. Now I could finally run and play adventures using the Bushi, Samurai, Wujin, and Ninja. Not to mention, I now had a logical place to put the monk class. But there was still no real setting established in which I could run the games out of that book. But then in 1988, TSR came out with the Kiritur, the Eastern Realms box set. Kiritur is now one of my favorite settings, and I'm really pleased to have with me today one of its principal creators behind that setting, Deborah Taramis Christian, known to her friends, which I like to now think I'm one of, as simply Taramis. Hi, Taramis.
Well, hello, Chad. Thanks for having me on your podcast.
Well, thanks for being on it. Hey, Taramis. So let's just get right into it. How did you first get into the gaming industry?
Oh, man. It's interesting that you mention Oriental Adventures, because when that came out, I also went, oh my God, this is terrific, and I jumped right on it. Before that existed, I had stumbled across a copy of Bushido by Mark Arsenault and someone else whose name I'm blanking on right now. And at the time, that was like the gold standard for anything Japanesey, and it was a wonderful, and still is a wonderful compendium of stuff about that setting. But I looked at it, and I kind of did, head palm and went, oh my God, I could be gaming in an Asian setting. What was I not thinking about before? Because I am a complete Japanophile myself, and I'd been doing my medieval adventures and D&D kind of stuff. And when I saw this, the light bulb went on. I went, oh, I can go somewhere else with this stuff. So I didn't read Bushido. I glanced through it enough to go, I want to do original work in that kind of place, and I put it aside. And frankly, to this day, I have never come back to it except to browse headers and subtitles and go, I have to read this cover to cover, but not yet, because I don't want it to influence my own creative work. So I had come across Bushido, and I set it aside, and during like 1985, 86, about the time OA was coming out, I was designing my own setting of my own version of an Asian culture that was becoming key to my fiction writing, because I'm also a science fiction and fantasy novelist. And I had a setting called Kowloon, an island nation that was sort of going to become the kernel of an eventual spacefaring empire. So, in fact, my fantasy worlds and my science fiction worlds are connected in that way. There's cultural continuity throughout. So anyway, I'm doing this development work on Kowloon when Oriental Adventures started to really pick up steam. Excuse me. So I picked that up and I went, oh, gosh, I've been doing game work since 1979. And as a matter of fact, to this day, I have only played in 6 games. I have GM'd or DM'd all the rest of these decades because I played a couple games and I went, yeah, boring. I want to run the world, man.
Of course.
Of course. And that's the niche I settled in, and there I went forever after, basically. So I'd been in this heavy design mode and creating this stuff, and when Oriental Adventures came out, I went, oh, TSR, I mean, that was the 800-pound gorilla at the time. I said, I would just so love to work for them. But it wasn't like they were advertising, we're hiring, come here to live in Lake Geneva and be a writer for us. So that was not in the cards. But I just took a flyer and wrote up an adventure synopsis and sent it off to them in 1986. And it was for a module that was a derivation of something I had created in my Kowloon setting. And it was called The Ghost of Shikui Hot Springs, about a haunting that the players had to figure out the what's and whys.
I love a good mystery.
It was a good mystery and very, it tapped into a lot of the supernatural stuff that goes on in Japanese culture. So I was quite happy with it. And in fact, TSR wrote me back and said, yes, we'll take your adventure module. And I went, oh my God. So I did the happy dance for a while about that. But then, that was in 1986, early 1986. But then couple months later, comes this letter that said, we have decided to no longer publish adventure modules in this setting. So they'd already made a corporate decision about how much they were going to support OA beyond the initial source book. And I went, oh, there goes my chance. But, oh no, Bruce Hurd, who managed the freelance pool for TSR at the time, and he was kind of the manager behind many of the product lines that TSR was putting out. He said, well, we can't do that module because we're not doing those anymore, but would you like to do other stuff for us? Would you like to edit something? Would you like to contribute to something else? And I went, oh yeah, okay. So I did another happy dance, and I started to do freelance work for TSR. So I edited things like the Child's Play book, and gosh, I can't even remember them all now because it was so long ago, but you can see things at my website, DeborahTeramisChristian.com. Go to the About section and click on Bibliography, and there's a very long list there of things I did for TSR. So I started to edit and contribute for their work. And then along came the day when they decided to do the Karatur box set, and I was one of the people Bruce approached and said, would you like to contribute to this box set? And I went, oh, happy dance time again, because it's a visit to that Asian setting that I'm so very fond of. And so I jumped on it. So that's what got me in the door, not just with my game industry writing, because once you start writing for TSR, at least at that time, what a wonderful credential, right? And so then I could approach other companies and other places and do stuff for them. Although I wrote before that, in 1984, I was writing for Thieves Guild, which you may or may not be familiar with. Do you know
yes,
Thieves
I
Guild?
am. Yeah, Thieves Guild.
I adore them. To this day, I have old out-of-print works of theirs because they were the first people that did the thing dearest to my heart, which is they took on thieves and nefarious characters and did them justice, right? So they built out, based on the D&D setting, they expanded thiefly skills and stealing and kind of hitting people with a sap in dark alleys and all this fun stuff.
Nice.
It was really great. So I saw that supplement and I went, oh, these people are great. And I ended up writing a tournament module for them called Troila's Revenge in 1984. And I wished that their company had survived longer. I wanted to do a lot more writing for them, but that wasn't in the cards. So anyway, I had that kind of background going on by the time I started to work for TSR as a freelancer, and then it was easy to get engaged with other companies as well. And that's another story, kind of off track. I won't get into it right now. But anyway, so that brings me to the Karatur stuff. They already had an outline for that in terms of how they wanted info presented. Right? You need to give us little thumbnail sketches of important locales, and here's a map. At least in the case of Kozukura, I don't recall that was the case with Malatra, which in their book is simply titled The Jungle Lands. That was much more amorphous. But for Kozukura, I think they had, because it had been referenced in Oriental Adventures modules, they already had a map about it, and they had some basic things. I think that I was given a basic timeline, if I recall correctly, with some names were already on it, and who did what when, who the emperor was, things like that. So there was some stuff already established as canon, and I had to incorporate that in the work that I did for Kozukura. But the basic mandate was, give us an analog of Shogun Japan, medieval Shogun Japan, and that's kind of what we want for Kozukura. So that's what I did.
Very interesting. And, that came out in Volume 2 in the box set, Malatra and Kozukura. And I was actually just doing a little reading on it here this weekend. And it's interesting because within Malatra, you're really covering quite a large geographical area. You have the equivalents, I believe, of Malaysia, Vietnam, Thailand. It's very interesting.
Actually, the inspiration for that was Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. Well, and a little bit of island stuff, yes, going on, like Malaysia flavored. But basically it was those places. And the core inspiration there for me was I had read various, kind of cultural anthropology bits about the hill tribes of Laos and Cambodia. And I thought, no one deals with this at all in RPG land. It just is not on the radar of Western gamers at all.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because the hill tribes make a perfect background if you want to run a barbarian using that setting.
Yeah, very true. Very true. And it's a hotbed of unusual customs. Although I have to say, when I wrote that, of course, this was way before internet days. What we had for online resources were maybe you could run a program called Gopher to get files from universities. And beyond that, it was like AOL and Genie and Prodigy and CompuServe.
I remember those.
Yeah, and I was on CompuServe basically and a little bit dabbled in AOL at the time. So it was difficult. You couldn't easily get to the surfeit of information that we have today. I was living in Reno, Nevada at the time, so I spent a lot of time in the university library. But, of course, libraries, unlike Google, you have to really slog and dog around to find related information. And so I would say, based on the resource pool that I had at the time, today I would do much better justice to the setting, to the culture, both in Malatra and Kozukura than I could do in 1987, 88 when that project was underway, unfortunately. But I was inspired by the research that I did, so I went out of my way to do basically cultural anthropology research before I did any writing on either of those settings. Also, as I mentioned, being a Japanophile, I had a lot of my own resource books, Japanese history, Japanese culture, things about samurai. I had that in my own reference library, thankfully. So I had a lot of stuff at hand. Although, again, today, Chad, I wouldn't yeah. Okay, here's an arm wrestling that goes on with the publisher. Publisher says to you, we want something that looks like XYZ. Okay, you do your best to kind of meet that mandate as a freelance writer. But to step back, at this remove, I have to say, one of the things that bugs me about those settings is that they are so very Earth analog. And it's okay if you want to go play in a fantasy version of earthly medieval Japan, right? You do what you can with those ingredients. But because of that constraint of trying to create an analogish sort of fantasy setting, I think it kind of cramps what one can do creatively and maybe doesn't even do justice to the setting, because it becomes an echo chamber. Medieval Japan did X, and so I must do X in my setting here. For instance, the moving of the capital. I
went to Edo, I believe. I actually lived in Japan for 6 years. My wife
did you really?
Yeah,
cool.
it was awesome. I was actually a member of a group there that's still going strong of expats called the Japanese International Gamers Guild, and we had a lot of fun role-playing games over there. And I find it interesting because many of the Japanese role players love the European setting.
Mm-hmm. It's that thing that you don't know that's interesting to explore.
Yeah, it's the mystery of it. It's the mythology behind it. It does make it more interesting, I think, for people to delve into areas not so close to their own cultural history, perhaps.
Yeah.
That is interesting. Now,
excuse me. Let me finish that thought because
I'm sorry.
I was name stumbling and didn't quite finish what I was thinking about. In real life, Kyoto moved to Edo, which became Tokyo, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's that fact. In the Kozukura setting, we have Fukama moves to Doju, which becomes the capital. But that move of capitals exists only to be an analog to the Earth events. Now, as a world builder and a game designer, I have to ask, really, given the setting, given the real, let's say, quote-unquote, real events that happen in Kozukura, would they really have moved their capital? Would there have been an impetus? Would it have mattered? Actually, probably not. And it exists in this book only because of the mandate to be an analog to the Earth setting. So I think that can eventually make for very skewed sense of reality in the game world, as it were. And I wouldn't do something that way today.
I see. Well, have you thought about, I know Kinzer and Company does a lot with the Open Gaming License with their Hackmaster series, and then there's Osric out there. Have you ever considered revisiting Karatur for something like that?
Well, no, and the reason is because a lot of my creative juice around that whole thing came as spin-off from me working on my own Kowloon setting.
Oh.
Which is something I don't want to give away bits and pieces of. I don't want to bleed off the creative energy into something that's genericized into a marketable, everybody knows medieval Japan, let's set something there, right? I kind of don't want to take my original setting and neuter it in that manner. And the other thing is that the creative work I do in that regard, I want to put into my original setting, which is already the background for my free novel online called Dragon Sword, which I was working on before I approached TSR about Oriental Adventures. And some of the elements of Dragon Sword actually became incorporated into some of the work that I did for them in terms of OA-related material. So that was
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's sort of an incestuous cycle going on there.
Yeah. I can understand
interested?
that, though. I can understand. You have an idea. You wanna keep it original, and you wanna run with that. It totally makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, Kowloon then becomes the kind of the seed culture of my spacefaring Sudani Empire, which is featured in my science fiction novels. So I have a huge, timeline and cultural continuity thing going on, and I kind of don't want to parse that out into other chunks elsewhere.
Sure. And you know what? Before I let you go today, I'm going to want to actually get a little more into your projects that you're currently running with. But before we do that, why don't we, one question I wanted to ask was when they produced Kara-Tur, it was put into the Forgotten Realms continent. And I guess I can understand that was their big setting at the time.
Yeah, it was selling.
Greyhawk was no longer something they were so much focusing on. But can you get into a little bit of the decision making on that?
No, not at all. As a freelancer, this is like way over my pay grade. I'm simply told, we need X, write X. And I went, okay. How they package it and sell it and the rationale behind all that. I suppose if I had been interested at the time, I could have chatted with Bruce and said, hey, why are you all doing this and that? And he might have told me, or he might not, depending how proprietary their marketing decisions were at the time. But we never had that conversation, so I have no clue.
Well, that makes sense, and I could certainly understand that. Okay, what about, what was it like in TSR at that time? I know you were freelancing with them, and what was did you get to see much of the environment within the company at that time?
Well, only at the geographical remove of being somebody they contracted to do work. So no, I had no firsthand knowledge or experience of the company.
Okay.
So I've never been to Wisconsin, much less their offices or none of that. My contacts with TSR were with Bruce as the person orchestrating my work, and a lady whose name I just can't remember right now, but she was like in charge of the copy proofing and editing, so she and I had some nice dialogues. She was very wonderful to work with. But aside from that, I have to say, it became very difficult to work with TSR as a freelancer during that part of the 80s, as you no doubt know, or many of your listeners know. Mm-hmm. They were going through a lot of corporate turmoil. And for a period of time, they were very tight on cash flow. And tight means they didn't pay me for 5 months tight. So
that can cut into the creative juices.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, I couldn't pay my rent. And I couldn't pay my electricity, and I couldn't buy groceries. It was that kind of tight. And partly this is my problem because, well, the market being what it was at the time, it was difficult to work for more than one publisher. First off, it was difficult to contact them. Everything was by snail mail, right? Mm-hmm. And if you didn't know someone, it was hard to get an entree. So a freelancer, like today, you might have many clients you could write for. Then you were lucky to have one or two that you could rely on. So I didn't have enough eggs in enough baskets. So in one way, that's my bad. In another way, that's just how it was at the time. But a large part of my income did depend on my work for TSR. And when they decided not to pay their freelancers, at one point I don't remember if I emailed or called up or whatever. I think it was email, because the response I got was, well, we got to pay our light bills, and when we're done with that, we'll pay you. Excuse me? I mean, I don't know what accounting wonk wrote me that crap, but, I have a light bill to pay also, dude, and I'm a drop in your bucket. Pay me. But that is actually why I quit doing freelance RPG writing for a living, because there was a kind of a market shakeout going on at the time. And they were not the only publisher who was late on payments or didn't pay at all. And the end result was I went for months with no income, and one just can't survive that way.
Yeah, it does make it hard.
Yeah, and so I had to abandon that and return to the land of geekdom. Another story from hell I won't get into now. But at any rate, so that was my bad experience with TSR. Also was the little issue of when I became a noticed writer, for whatever value of noticed you want to fill in, I got offers to work from other places, or I should say, other folks wanted to retain my freelance writing services. And at one point, I kind of felt TSR out about this, and I said, so what would you think if I also wrote for so-and-so, one of their competitors? And I was told, well, if you write for our competition, we won't give you any more work. And I went, well, okay, fair enough. I understand that you don't want talent going to the other guys, but in that case, will you offer me an exclusive contract? And the answer was no. So that means basically a freelancer who does it as a hobby can get by because you can afford to just write for TSR and no one else whenever they decide to pay you. But if you need a real income from this, and this was all I was doing at the time in the late 80s, you have to write for more than one publisher. And if you're going to get blackballed by one, that's a big problem. And so that compelled me actually to write under a pen name for the competition so that I didn't get blackballed by TSR. And it was an economic necessity because I had business on my doorstep that was going to pay as much as TSR did, if not more. And TSR was saying, if you write for them, no more work from us. Well, here comes the pen name.
Oh, yeah. Do you mind if I ask what the pen name was?
It was Terry Randall, and I wrote for Mayfair Games. I wrote the adventure modules that were attached to their reboot of The City-State of the Invincible Overlord.
Oh, what a great setting, too.
Well, yes and no. The original setting was terrific, and, they could have done a great job on the reboot, but as a game designer, my big critique, and I said it to them at the time, and they said, oh, you should have been on board with this from the start. I'm going, you think? The issue was they had a hodgepodge going on in that city, in that setting. They had, Greek gods come in a culture that had no reflection of Greek culture at all. And, they're kind of like different elements that they thought were appealing were sort of copy-pasted and slapped onto the setting. Mm-hmm. And so it became a real kind of a bastardized stew. There was nothing coherent about it. There was no compelling theme. There was no coherent ethos. It was caca.
Yeah, it sounds like it kind of lost its focus.
It absolutely lost its focus, and that was the city-state itself. The initial box set they came out with focused on the city-state. And it was this hodgepodge of doo-doo. And that's why they started to look around for freelancers who could make some sense and build this out in a way that made sense. And so I'm ever grateful to Troy Denning, who invited me to that project. And I don't even recall anymore where he saw my work from, but he did see my work and liked it and gave me this opportunity to write a series of adventure modules. And I have to say, in all the professional work that I did, I'm probably proudest, besides the analog version of Medieval Japan, which I'm quite fond of, I'm proudest of the work I did for Mayfair Games with the adventure modules that expanded Calandia, the island nation that is the city-state setting. I did a source book that, at the time, aside from the Tecumel setting, was the only thing with an original language generated for the setting. I did different regions that had, coherent deities and cultures that suited the people, and it was just a wonderful world-building exercise. And I liked their approach. Their books were like, half source book, like half background on the setting, and then half adventure that takes place in the setting. So if you buy one of those adventure modules, and you can still find them used like on eBay and Noble Knight, places like that, the first part of it gives you a feel for the place, not just geography, but, you know, cultural things and religious things and weird that's going on. And then the other part of it, the adventure module, plays on all that background that's in that other book. So I think that was a terrific way to present these different parts of the place. And there was overarching themes that carried through and stuff. So that was terrific. I loved that. I've used the pen name Terry Randall since in business writing and some other things. So it was really great. And then they decided, you know, to no longer support that line. But there you have it. That's the RPG industry for you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, it's interesting when you talk about the analog history for Kozakura. I notice, you know, one of the things about Kozakura is it's kind of a it's kind of a cracked mirror image, I guess you could say, of WoW. How did that go down? They decided to make kind of two Japans.
You know, that baffles me, and all I can think is that someone in management must have thought that these different periods of Japan were so, in our historical timeline, were significantly different enough to warrant separate game treatments. Because when I wrote Kozakura, I had zero contact with any other designers. I had no idea WoW was even being developed or what it would look like. So all of that was new news to me. When the set came out, I went, oh, what's this? Right? Like, that's interesting. But so I can't excuse it or explain it.
Yeah, WoW seems to me to be more reminiscent of the Edo period, when there was actually unification throughout Japan, whereas Kozakura seems to come across to me as more of an earlier period of Japan's history.
Right. Well, yeah, where people are more struggling for dominance and trying to figure out which end is up and stuff. So I guess, I don't know. I just, I looked at Shogunate Samurai Japan and did my version of it. And frankly, I'm surprised that more of it does not overlap with the WoW setting. And I can't say, I don't believe that much, if any, of my work was edited at all. It's pretty much what I turned in is exactly what turned up in print. So it isn't like there was someone behind the scenes coordinating or orchestrating the overlap between the areas. You know what I mean?
Right.
There wasn't that kind of editorial development going on. I think they just read it and said, looks good, and tossed it in the book.
I see. What was it like working with the other guys on Karatur?
I didn't.
Oh, okay. I didn't know how much communication there was back and forth on that one.
Bruce said,
was there any kind of coordination? I mean, because you were in charge of Kozakura and the Jungle Lands Malatra. Was there any back and forth with the people who were in charge of writing the other areas?
No, not at all. Bruce Hurd was the single point of control. A little context about Bruce in case your listeners are not familiar with him. Besides being a product and line manager for many TSR products, he also is the creative talent behind the Mystara setting and wrote a lot of the adventures of the Princess Arc from Dragon Magazine. So he still is working with those properties kind of in a new modality. You'll have to check out his website, which I don't have right now, but I can tell you later. Maybe you can put it in your show notes. And,
yeah, you know what? I think I've actually been to his website, and off the top of my head, I'd have to look it up as well. But it is a pretty interesting website. And you have a website as well, don't you, Taramis?
Indeed, I do. DeborahTeramisChristian.com is my writerly blog. If that's too much of a mouthful to remember, Google Notes from the Lizard Lair. That's the name of the blog itself, and there will pop up a link. People who sign up get a free short story, so sign up to my mailing list and you can stay tuned into my writerly doings.
Very nice. And I've been to it. It's a really nice website.
Well, thank you. It's been neglected lately while I've done some other project work, but that's about to change. But yeah, no, Bruce was like the single point of control, and if he was happy with your work, then that was that. And there was no communication between us writers. We all had a different aspect of the elephant, right? You know, those blind men fondling the elephant. One thinks it's a wall, another thinks it's a snake, one thinks it's a tree.
Ah.
It's kind of like what we did on Curator, and I'm surprised that the whole fits together as well as it does, given those different approaches. But
well, you know, you must have done a good job because you know what they say: if you don't hear from your boss, that means that you're not doing anything wrong.
Well, thank you. Yes, I think that you're probably right.
It's probably better not to hear from your boss than to hear from your boss.
Yeah, that's about it. I wanted to send stuff in and hear a thank you, and that was it.
Well, I'm sure he did like it, though. But you know what? Some other projects you worked on. You also did the Minothrod Guilds, Lords of Darkness.
Bad, yeah.
Adventure Pack 1, Dragon Dawn.
Yes, I did that. I got hooked into the Dragonlance frenzy because whoever they had lined up for that module dropped out.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a last minute, oh my God, we have a production deadline. Who can write this for us?
And they said, Tara, Miss Can.
Yeah. Yeah. I have to say I'm not a huge fan of the Dragonlance setting. When I write an adventure setting or module, I can take my marching orders, and what I do is it's a mental exercise. I go there in my head, and given the givens, I be there. It's like, for me, my experience is like watching a movie play in my head. I can see scene unfold after scene. And that doesn't matter if it's a setting of my own creation, like Kowloon. I actually feel like I go there, like I'm a spy cam, and I can see and watch and also feel what people feel. That's my writing experience generally. And so if someone gives me a setting of their own, I do the same thing. I kind of close my eyes and go to that space, and then what I see there is what inspires my writing that follows. So I can do that with Dragonlance, and I guess that means on one level that I tune into the things that I like in that setting. Although it's been a long time, and right now I couldn't tell you off the cuff what those things were. It's not to say they weren't there. There was something I identified with. There was something that spoke to me enough that I could do it justice. Because if it's a setting I go, meh, I won't write it. I don't take work just to take work. I do it if there's something about it that appeals to me, even if, generally speaking, the concept I don't like. But specifically, whatever case is in point, if I can find that vibe, I'll go there. So anyway, I did that with Dragonlance. But here's what I don't like about the setting, and I want to mention this in part because public writer's honor here, I have been trashed on a grognardly forum or two for writing Dragonlance. Oh, well, you wrote that Dragonlance, so what do you know about games that aren't railroading? Screw you, old grumpy grognard. Let me tell you what I think about Dragonlance. You know, first off, I think it was really mediocre world building. Oh, trite, shallow, stereotypical. Now, I know millions of people have fallen in love with Drizzt and, you know, the Drow and everything else.
Oh, yes, Drizzt Do'Urden. I always thought he was a bit too reminiscent of Elric.
Perhaps so. But he was sort of like a character reduced to archetype and essentials, right? So to me, these people are too shallow. It's too simple. It's too, when you have something shallow and simple, it feels railroady, simply because, you know, if A, then B, and that's where you go with the characters. And, yeah, that's what I don't like about the writing of Weiss and Hickman. Now, I think they're very talented in certain regards. I really love their work. I love the work that Margaret Weiss did on, what was it, brain fart, Battlestar Galactica, I think she did. Right, that was...
I'd have to look that one up.
You know, she did a space gamey thing. I'm sure that's the one I'm thinking of, and perhaps I'm confused. At any rate, she has done some other work that I think is really grand, but this was early days for both her and Hickman, and they wrote books about this. Frankly, at the time, I had not yet sold my first novel. But when I read the first Dragonlance book, I got halfway through. And this is one of the few books I have really done this to in real life. I threw it across the room, and I said, I can write better than that. It irks me that these people are in print, and I'm not.
I've done that before.
You know, a lot of writers do that, and if you have ever written anything, or if you're a creative who has had difficulty getting your work out there, you probably identify with what I went through. And that's not necessarily an indictment of Weiss and Hickman's work. That's a reflection on where I was at in my creative cycle. But it was very frustrating to see something that I wouldn't write, that I didn't really see huge narrative value in, and it had this grand audience simply because of the platform that it found at TSR. And I was, I can't read this. I'm going to go get my own book in print. In fact, 4 years later, I did. Another story for later. But anyway, yeah, so creatively, I had issues with that entire setting, but okay, there's a fan base, and like I say, I did manage to find some elements of it that I liked and that I enjoyed, and I was able to do a decent adventure there, I think. I hope. I guess people who read Dragon Dawn, you know the problem is this, Chad. Back then, again, pre-internet days, it was damn hard to figure out if anybody liked your work. You didn't hear from anybody unless you went to cons and showed up in person and some random geek showed up and said, ooh, really liked your blah, blah, blah. You had zero clue. Zero clue. Unless your work happened to get reviewed somewhere in a print publication, and even those didn't have universal distribution, right? So you could be reviewed somewhere and never know about it. And so you kind of floundered along hoping that your work was readable and hoping that someone was buying it. And zero feedback. I've had more feedback in the last 5 years of internet social media density than in the 20 years before, which is really weird.
What about, do you get very much feedback for your Caricatura work?
Occasionally when I cross paths with people who are also I don't know how you say it, Asianophiles. So people who like that kind of setting, that have come across that work, or who are specifically fans of Caricatura, many of them really like what I did and have made that clear. And I go, oh, I'm glad someone liked that. That's so new news to me. I swear to God. In fact, in all the time that I wrote games, there's only one review that I ever saw of my work, and it was because of the city-state of the Invincible Overlord thing. The first module I did for that was called Raiders of Iron Rock, about which I had editorial hissy fits. But nevertheless, when it hit print, if I may quote this, the Review of Fantasy Gaming in England, 1988, said, I know this because it's on my bibliography, I wrote it before I zoned the verbiage, it said, at long last, orcs as they were really meant to be played. No more the pallid foes of derivative fantasy, but orcs in all their fearsomeness and cunning.
Oh, very nice.
I memorized that, which is the only reason I remembered it enough to put it in my bibliography. That is a wonderful kudo. I did
think
orcs
so.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
And it is always nice to see somebody treat, such a canonical, such a canon race of villains with some originality and really looking at their psychology.
Exactly. My starting point with the orcs was to say, what's their culture about, and therefore how are they in the real world? Real world being the world they live in. And out of that grew the orcs that I did for that game setting, and someone recognized it. But that is the only review I have ever read of almost all my RPG work from the 1980s through the 90s. That's it.
Very interesting.
Very well, yeah, but kind of frustrating if you're a writer because we do like the kudos now.
Well, yeah, I totally understand that. Well, let me end it with this. Do you have any advice to somebody if they wanted to get into the freelance game writing?
Oh, if you had asked me this 15 years ago, I would have said, dude, you're so out of luck. No one hires people they don't know. But today, the answer is completely different. I think this is the most wonderful time for freelance writers. There's not only a resurgence of interest in the old stuff, but there's a blossoming kind of the gamer population generally, and you have the benefit of being able to publish your own stuff for literally $0 of cost.
Mm-hmm.
In 1982, I was publishing a technical journal that cost me $16,000 a year to put into print, so for every quarter, $4,000 in today's money.
Mm-hmm.
4K. Bleh. If I want to print what I have to tell you, drop 4K. Bleh. Yeah, I'm so sure. Who can afford that today? You can't. But today it's completely irrelevant. If you publish EPUBs, if you do electronic publishing, there's no money. There's no cost. There's no distribution fees. It's on you, of course, to do the time and the effort and the production work and pay attention to your grammar. Hire an editor unless your own grammar is perfect. Get a good graphic artist and have someone help you put it together so it makes sense. But if you can do those things, take your creative product and do your brainchild and publish it yourself. And then once you have it out there, put it on DriveThruRPG or RPG Now. Once you have something out there, then you start to point people to it. You start to build a following. You build a community, a discussion around your work and what you're doing. Then you become someone that publishers want to talk to. Of course, the alternative is if you've written for game publications or you have a blog that's very busy and thoughtful, you can also approach other publishers and say, hey, I write whatever it is I write. Will you consider a submission from me?
Mm-hmm.
That's a more old-fashioned route. It still works, but it's difficult simply because there's so much going on out there, and so many small publishers, like the indie press today, is mostly one-person companies or 1 to 5 people. They got their own stuff they're working on, and they really don't have a budget to look at your stuff unless it's completely in line with their own concept and their product, which usually isn't the case. So basically, my advice would be, if I was just starting out today, I would come up with something I think, I don't want to say it's original because everyone thinks their stuff is original.
Mm-hmm.
I'd do something that reflects a world and a setting I created that I really, really like, that I'm passionate about, that I go, oh, this is so cool. I can't wait to share this with others. And I'd write the setting, and I'd write a sample adventure module in that setting, and I would publish that as an EPUB in one of the RPG industry-related venues. And then I would do a social media blitz to draw attention to that work. I'd be on G+, sparking conversations. I'd be involved in the G+ communities, which for people not familiar with G+, a lot of those postings are private, so they don't hit the social media metrics. There's a lot more activity going on there than you probably realize. But the conversations there are very substantive, as opposed to Facebook, where people write brief things and often stupid things. But I would
never.
Never. Someone on the internet is wrong. Oh no.
Well, hey, here's then a follow-up question on that. You mentioned getting yourself a artist. Do you have any recommendations? That's always been a kind of a, if there is a big obstacle today in publishing, I think it can still be fairly expensive to get an artist. Or do you know of another, how the best way to go about that is?
Well, you know what? It's funny you should ask that question because, it can be very expensive to get an artist and just pay them dollars for their work. So if you don't have that kind of funding, here's 2 alternatives. One is you invite an artist. Make sure you like their work. But you invite an artist to come in with you as partners on the project. So their work is free, but you profit share.
Right.
Well, there's that. So they'll come in on the possibility that they'll see some money, but they become like a co-owner of the work. Mm-hmm. The other alternative, and oddly enough, almost no one is doing this, but I have found all kinds of people are open to this. So I think this is my own original idea. Hey, if you've thought of this before, you who are listening, let me know because we need to noodle about nuances. So here's the new concept. I do the following thing with my publishing company, Storybones Publishing.
Mm-hmm.
I invite people to contribute work, but I do it on a work-for-hire basis. Okay, so that's like the old-fashioned thing is you do X, and I get all the rights to it. I own the copyright. I can regurgitate it however I want. It's not yours anymore after you turn it in. Now, normally one pays the artist or the writer a chunk of money for this, and they go away happy, count their shekels, and the publisher runs off and does whatever with the work. Those are the terms that I wrote for TSR and Mayfair and all these others. Quite standard work for hire. But the wrinkle in this worm, to mash some metaphors, is I pay these people for their work for hire on a royalty basis. So if they are willing to take the gamble, they have locked themselves into a long tail income for the lifetime of the work as compensation for their work for hire. So it's a combination of a royalty agreement you would do with someone who's, a contributor to an anthology or a partner in your work, but it's for a work for hire. So if you decide that you want to grab the artwork and run with it and use it in other projects and this and that and not have to always ask someone's permission for it, you want to think about a work for hire, but here's the way to do it with no money up front. You say, hey, work for hire, in compensation, I'll give you a royalty percentage. A lot of people will go, you're asking me to work for free. Well, no, I'm asking you to work for delayed payment, and you'll get paid every time I get paid.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Or we'll give you a periodic accounting every 6 months, whatever, just like any royalty agreement goes. But some people are incredibly interested in this, and they jump on it, and they go, yeah. And that's actually how I'm doing my business these days.
Well, that's interesting. Well, and that brings me, I said that we were going into the last part, but there is one more thing I wanted to touch on, and that is a nice segue into what are your current projects that you're working on?
Okay, well, I know we have gone on for a while, haven't we? So I'll try and I'll keep this short. I do want to mention my recent publications, and then I'll tell you about some works in progress. So recently, but this is of particular interest to gamers, in the spring of this year, we published the Gazetteer Writer's Manual, which I co-authored with Bruce Hurd. This is a really terrific book. Y'all got to check this out. If you design worlds, if you want to take that information and either create a writer's Bible or a guidebook to your world for your readers, your audience, or your gamers, this book gives you a complete blueprint how-to. The only thing it doesn't really get into is mapping, because that's kind of its own weird genre by itself. But this is a complete outline, how-to, step-by-step, really well-written, really comprehensive. And if you sit down and work with this book from beginning to end, you will take your world-building game design chaos and turn it into a book you can publish, or great handouts for your tabletop game, or what have you. So, Gazetteer Writer's Manual. It's at Amazon.com, but the best place to get it, because we get more of the royalty, is at my publishing site, Storybones.net.
Storybones.net.
Yes, that has the complete enchilada of books and things I publish. Related to this book is World Building Tips, Volume 1. This is a compendium of tips from my worldbuilding.com community. So I have a thing called the World Building Academy. That's world-building.com. And if you sign up for the mailing list, every week you get a free world building tip, something how-to, something pithy to help you in that process. And this book that's out is a compendium of 6 months worth of tips. And I don't repeat tips on the list. So, if you join today, you won't have a clue what came for the last year. But this is a book that will help you catch up on that. So that's a really good deal. And that's also at Storybones in Amazon. And I have some other books and things. If you go to storybones.net, hit the bookstore link, you can browse and see what all is out there. But the other projects I'm working on, I have a couple of books I need, like novels, I need to get out of my hair and down the road, and then I can return to some game-related publishing. So right now I have a book called Splintegrate that is in the editorial pipeline at Tor Books. They've published all of my traditionally published work, and this book is kind of a semi-sequel to my science fiction book Mainline. They've bumped the publishing date again, so I don't know when it's coming out. To be determined. Anyway, Splintegrate is about a clone and her travails in a futuristic, intrigue-filled setting. And I have What the heck else do I have? Dragon Sword I mentioned earlier. That's a free book. You can find it at dragonsword.info. And it was inspired by the Kowloon setting that was part of the pre-Genesis to the Kara-Tur setting. It's half of a duology, and I'm working on the second half. I'm going to publish them all together as an omnibus when it's done. But that's on hold because I got to get these more commercial projects out of the way right now. And my last thing worth mentioning that I'm in the middle of is Queen Victoria's Transmogrifier. It's a alternate Victorian world timeline in which the headmistress of a secret order saves Queen Victoria from an assassination attempt with lots of supernatural stuff going on.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Well, I like the sound of that. I'm going to be checking that one out myself.
It's a fun book. Pretty soon, I think I may put some excerpts up at my writer blog, Notes from the Lizard Lair, so people can start to get a feel for what's going on. In fact, this is a book I'm kind of on the fence about. I partly want to publish it. Like, if you subscribe, you'll get the installments as they go, so I can do like Charles Dickens did and do a weekly or monthly installment until the whole thing is done, and then when it's edited, you'll get the final book for free. So I might do that, but I don't know how much interest there is in that. Anyway, if y'all are interested, drop me a note, Teramis@DeborahChristian.com, and let me know. Would you want to read a book by installment? I don't know.
I think that would be really neat. And you're right. That was something that was actually very big during the Victorian age.
It was. In the 19th century, all the big names we know today got published that way.
Oh, yeah. What was that one that Dickens wrote? I get mind blocks all the time. And I'm actually in English. I got my degree in English.
That'll account for it.
Yeah, exactly.
He wrote Pickwick Papers that way, and then everything else, up to, what the heck, David Copperfield was big that way, and just about any title you can name, they all came out in the weekly serials first.
Oh, yeah, and people literally, not the rich even, but everybody at that time waited for those installments. That was like TV for them. They waited for the next episode to come out.
In fact, I've heard that there were crowds lined up at the dock in New York waiting for the ship to come from England with the newest installment of his next book.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That is really neat. Well, I tell you what, I am not going to keep you any longer because I know that you're busy right now, but I wanted to really thank you, Teramis, for talking about not just Kara-Tur, but all the projects that you're working on.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it, and I gotta say, see, this is part of the internet thing. I'm surprised that people have a clue what I did over all these many years ago, and that they're still interested in it. I think that's fabulous, and I hope that I can continue to contribute new and fresh and exciting things to gaming adventure land. I need to get some books, like I say, off my plate first before I can really forge ahead with that. May I say one last thing? World Building Academy, if you're interested in game design and world building that supports a setting and makes it really plausible, check out the World Building Academy. I'm about to launch a program about creating worlds and gazetteers and a guideline to do that creativity work. Go to world-building.com/programs. You'll see announcements for it there when it's up.
Well, I think that's great, and I have a feeling a lot of people are going to be hitting that because world building is one of my favorite parts of running a game, in fact, or writing a book.
Yeah, it can be all-consuming, but it doesn't have to stay there. People go, oh, I have too much world info. What sense do I make of it? You can actually turn it into a game or a book or whatever. You just need to follow a model that will get you from A to Z.
Exactly. Well, thank you very much, Teramis. And I look forward to the next time we talk.
Likewise. Thank you very much for the time.
All right.
An amazing interview, dude.
Very cool. Very cool.
Well, thank you very much. And
Chad, how'd you get a hold of her?
Yeah, I was kind of curious how you got to that.
Well, actually, she is a poster over on Dragon's Foot, and which is the forum website that a lot of old schoolers go to. And I sent her a private message about a year ago I was actually in the middle of writing Red Crane, White Fox for GaryCon 4, and I wanted to run some ideas past her. And she was kind enough to respond, and she had me send her a copy of the adventure, and she looked it over, and she came back to me with some really nice critiques. And it just kind of went from there. She friended me on Facebook, and whenever I'd have ideas for games or just something to run, a lot of times I still send them by her.
Interesting.
Cool.
Well,
yeah, and
I'm
sorry, what's that?
I said I'm glad she's there to give some advice and help people out for stuff like that.
Oh yeah. She actually is still putting out books on, as you heard in the interview, one of her things that she's really focused on is world building. So now she did a very good job of making the character material for Kozakura and Wa and Malatra fairly analog to real historic areas here. But that said, she's actually, I think, more interested in the creating a world of your own, not being analog to anything existing. So, it's interesting that she put so much work into Kozakura and Wa Malatra, because I know that she's also very much a fan of building one's own world out.
Right.
So, she is definitely, I'd highly recommend people checking out some of her other material. And she has, she was a freelancer for TSR, so she has put, there's a number of works out there that have her name on it, and they're all really good. I know she did a lot with Top Secret as well. And we got into a long conversation, obviously, talking about Top Secret.
Yeah. Be a fly on the wall for that one.
Yeah, well,
no kidding.
She has a background that suits her well to writing Top Secret.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Well, if you have any more interviews like that, I know you interviewed. We have another one. You just recently just came out with the interview with Alex from Gamer.
Alex Kramer. Yeah, I was actually at Gamehole just a week ago, actually. And we had a blast, by the way. I went there with the other guys from the Dead Game Society, Michael and Colin, and we had an absolute blast. Speaking of Top Secret, Colin and I ran a game of Top Secret there that man, it was fun. We actually co-ran that one. But then later that night, I got to speak with Gamehole's founder, a gentleman by the name of Alex Kramer, and he was very nice. He took us out to eat that night, and we sat and talked, and he showed us this just amazing game room that he has. And yeah, if you've ever, one of the things I wanted to interview him about was if you've ever thought about making your own convention, gaming convention, he really, in the interview that you'll hear, he really lays it out, the whole process of what is involved in making putting together a quality convention. And it's not, I don't know about you guys, but I know that, I've talked with friends before, hey, let's make a convention. And you start to think that all you need is a place to hold it, and there's a lot of considerations that go into doing it. And he really outlines them. He lays all these considerations out, and he's in his day-to-day work. He's a successful businessman, and he knows how to put together something like this, and he really put his real life skills into building that convention. It was a wonderful convention.
Cool. Well, we appreciate all that you did for us there.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you so much.
Not a problem.
I think we're going to end the show by heading into our third segment of the Dungeon Master Assistant, which people are seeming to really like the last two so far.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Mr. Ronald Korn in action. Let's head right into that.
Welcome back to another edition of the DM's Assistant. Today I thought we'd discuss tips on managing large groups of players. When I first started playing D&D, a normal group size for us was just about 2 players. Of course, the good thing with that was that we could play nearly every day. There were times we got a few more players together, but at max the party size was probably a very manageable 4 to 6 players. The first time I ran a group of players larger than that was a return for college to the old stomping grounds for a weekend game. At that time, my answer to running a large group was, don't split the party, and anyone who did so met a very calculated and timely demise. After a few deaths, the message was quite clear. We only ever had one weekend game. You see, players don't want to be railroaded, and they certainly don't want to die because the DM can't handle a few players having a mind of their own. Alright, so speed up the clock. Now as an adult, I run a monthly game. The monthly game, at its high, had 12 regular players for over a 2-year span. Currently, due to attrition, the group now has a consistent 6 to 8, which is still high. But for over that 2-year period, I had to manage a very large group. And unlike the weekend game, I allow freedom, and the direct result was a campaign that lasted 2 years. So how do you manage large groups? Well, here are some tips. First, unlike my college days, actually encourage the group to split the party. Splitting the party actually makes it easier for you to DM. It gives you 2 smaller groups. Try to avoid 3 or more splits, and you can do that by the following. During the gaming session, allow choice, but create limited choice options. For example, the party is given the mission to find out what's causing the raids on the town. The party decides to question some townsfolk. As you dispense the information, provide rumors of 2, no more than 3 possible locales. This way you control the party split. Now next, physically separate the party. If some of the party members decide to head towards the abandoned mines and others want to go to speak to the mayor first, I ask for a show of hands, who's going to A, who's going to B, and once I know who's going where, I ask one of the 2 groups to go into the other room where I've conveniently set up a second table and a set of chairs waiting for them. For all intents and purposes, creating 2 games. Since you're going to have to go from table to table frequently, make sure you don't spend too much time at one table. Give each group just enough pertinent information and end with a puzzle or quandary for them to think about. Then go to the other table. If the split is much smaller, say 1 or 2 players, bring the players aside, give them some juicy information, and when you're done, ask the players if they're going back to the group. Remind them that they don't have to share the information if they don't want to. Here are a few more game management tips. Whether in one group or 2, get assistance from the table during combat. Having a player designated to handle and record initiative orders so you don't have to. This frees you up to handle the narrative and the monsters. Also, if someone's willing, you can even appoint a co-DM. Depending on their level of comfortability, you can either allow the co-DM to run a section of the adventure on their own, or allow them to play key NPCs. This will allow you time to attend to the other group. And lastly, but probably most importantly, you have to know your players. Know what they like and expect to get out of the game, and build your campaign around each and every one, giving each their moment to shine. Tailoring the adventure prevents boredom and keeps players invested. This is hard to do in a large group, but if you understand the most common player types and their play preferences, you'll go a long way. Since I'm running out of time, I'll leave player preferences for another session. So keep listening to the Roll for Initiative podcast for future episodes of the DM's Assistant. And remember, when you miss your roll to detect the secret you know is there, you always have the DM's Assistant to peek behind the screen. Good night.
Yet another segment. I don't know. Is the background music on those things bad? Because some people too. I have seen. Excuse me. 2 people complain about the background music. Matt, your audio person. How did it come out?
At times, it might be a little difficult to understand them. Just it's all about getting the levels right. So some people like having people talk, especially if it's a solo person with like some background noise, just something subtle underneath. Other people prefer just having the voice. So it's kind of preference. I tend to lean. I can go either way. It really depends on the person. It doesn't bother me, but I can see how some people may not like it. So I know that was a big rambling answer for getting nowhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I'd say it's the music can be really good. It can add to something, but a lot of times when listeners are really trying to hear what the speaker is talking about, it can also get a little bit in the way.
Right.
Yeah, it could be distracting.
Well, too effing bad. That's what. Wait, I'm sure that'll be a 1-star now on iTunes because I said that.
Oh no.
Yeah, I know. Like we haven't gotten those before, right, Nick?
Yeah, long time ago though we got one, and that was
Now you're gonna just cause everybody to go write 1-stars.
No, wait a minute. You brought that up. Hey.
It's nice to see that most of our reviews are all positive reviews.
Yes.
Well, I should say 90% of them are positive reviews. We only have that small 10% during the dark times.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd have to say if most of the reviews were negative, that would mean we had some work to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We've been lucky. We've been very lucky.
Yes, we have.
Yep. Well, I guess that's going to end the show this week.
Thought we were doing
on that
whole episode.
So we're going to do another show next week on Magic users. I've seen quite a bit of comment on the forums of people saying you should do a show on Magic user. Well, another show on Magic users. So we'll do another show on Magic users.
See what other angle we can go.
We'll do it with our new Jason.
Yes.
Yay!
Jason Dose.
Yeah, and you know what?
That
that might be a good episode to also talk about the wish spell.
Yes.
We did a really large episode on wishes back on.
Yeah, we did.
36, 7, around there.
Let's see here.
I remember that one too, and we did a follow up with Will. I remember that too.
Because let's see here, 111. It was in a let's see here. Oh, it was in a special No, that was about it. I'm not actually seeing anything where we specifically stated. I'm wondering some of these things where we remember talking about it. It was in like Sage Advice.
Might have been like a Sage Advice. Yeah.
I think a lot of it. We never did a formal segment. We basically get Sage Advice voicemails and emails, and we spark a good conversation about it. And all of a sudden, we're in our brains, we're thinking we did a segment when really all we did was answer an email.
Yeah, I remember we were talking about doing a segment on it. That was in the last show, wasn't it? Yeah. We were talking about how do you end a wish spell.
Yes, without having to write the end.
The end. Well, either way, it'll be fun to talk about Magic users. And just tie a lot of stuff into that.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of cool angles that we can probably go with.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And send us your suggestions. I would say that too over next week if you can.
Right.
Well, who knows?
And send me your money.
Yes.
Oh wait, no, that's not official.
Send Electrum. That's the only way we can afford Nick's new contract.
Yes, I love Electrum pieces. They're fine.
Nick has been re-signed to have one belt run for about 3 months.
Okay.
Cool.
But he's going to lose horribly to some guy I don't know, Daniel Bryan.
Gorilla Monsoon. I'll take him. He's old.
Hey, he's
the reanimated Gorilla Monsoon.
He's a zombie?
If you wrestled him today, he would be.
That's true.
Is his new manager Paul Bearer?
Another
zing!
Oh, another dead person.
That's just disrespectful.
Yeah, he died this past year.
Which is funny that he threw the zombies and wrestling together because the game All Flesh Must Be Eaten, one of their supplements was Zombie Smackdown.
Yeah.
Nice.
Wrestling and zombies. Woohoo!
Yeah. I know someone who actually filmed a zombie movie involving zombie luchadors.
I found it. Issue number 4. Research me a wish.
That would explain why I don't.
That was a while ago.
Yeah, my notes only go back to issue 29.
When did I start? Issue 11, I think.
Yeah, it was just Jason and I, but I did do a follow-up. I remember with Will. It was just Will and myself on the show.
Okay.
So somewhere in Volume 2, there has to be a wish show with just Will and myself because I know he wanted to talk about it because he loves wishes. So, so we could do another show on wishes again too. Why not? Who's it going to kill? Only Nick.
Hey.
Unless you wish you were dead.
Major announcement on Facebook I just saw flash before my eyes, and I'm very appalled. I don't know if I should tell you about it, but
oh yes, Life Day.
No.
Oh.
The Epic Party of 2014 back together again, Vanilla Ice and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Oh God.
And on that note,
yeah. Happy Life Day. Today is Life Day, you know.
Yes, I know. I'm going to
So
watch.
go out and get a life.
I'm going to watch the Riff Tracks version. Thank you very much.
Oh, and happy birthday to Mad.
Yes, well, that's
Happy
tomorrow.
birthday, Matt.
Yes, thank you.
Close enough, birthday boy.
Yes, I share a very ominous birthday for all kinds of things happened on it. I shared my birthday with Mickey Mouse, with the original Steamboat Willie cartoon first aired on my birthday 50 years prior to me being born. And then on the exact day I was born, the Jonestown mass suicide. Yeah, and then the day prior was the Star Wars Holiday Special. I wonder if they're related.
So you're saying that bad things happen on? We should be expecting bad things.
Yeah, bad things, bad times.
I did mention before the show with. Well, no, never mind.
Keep it original, keep it old school. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
And we are out.
The Roll for Initiative podcast is a production of Wild Games Productions in association with D20Radio.com. You can visit us at rfipodcast.com or contact us on our forums at osrgaming.org or even by calling us at 570-865-4210. This podcast is produced for entertainment purposes only. All other uses are prohibited. And remember, if your magic missile spell doesn't automatically hit, you're playing the wrong edition. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Roll for Initiative.